Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, called Prahlad Pacifies the Lord with Prayers. This is text number 46. Please repeat. Mauna vrata shruta tapodhyayana swadharma Vyakhyaraho japa samadhaya apavargya Praya param purushute tattvajitendriyanam Varta bhavantyutanavatra tudambhikanam Mauna vrata shruta tapodhyayana swadharma Vyakhyaraho japa samadhaya apavargya Praya param purushate tvajitendriyana Varta bhavantyutanavatra tudambhikana Mauna vrata shruta tapodhyayana swadharma Vyakhyaraho japa samadhaya apavargya Praya param purushate tvajitendriyana Varta bhavantyutanavatra tudambhikana Mauna, silence. Vrata, vows. Shruta, Vedic knowledge. Tapa, austerity. Adhyayana, study of scripture. Swadharma, executing varnashrama dharma. Vyakhya, explaining the shastras. Raha, living in a solitary place. Japa, chanting or reciting mantras. Samadhaya, remaining in trance. Apavargya, these are 10 types of activities for advancing on the path of liberation. Praya, generally. Param, the only means. Purusha, O my Lord. Te, all of them. Tu, but. Ajita indriyana, of persons who cannot control the senses. Varta, means of living. Bhavanti, are. Uta, so it is said. Na, not. Va, or. Atra, in this connection. Tu, but. Dambhikanam, of persons who are falsely proud. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, there are 10 prescribed methods on the path of liberation: to remain silent, not to speak to anyone, to observe vows, to amass all kinds of Vedic knowledge, to undergo austerities, to study the Vedas and other Vedic literatures, to execute the duties of varnashrama dharma, to explain the shastras, to stay in a solitary place, to chant mantras silently, and to be absorbed in trance. These different methods for liberation are generally only a professional practice and means of livelihood for those who have not conquered their senses. Because such persons are falsely proud, these procedures may not be successful. Purport. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Kechit kevalaya bhaktya vasudeva parayana agham dhunvanti kartsnena niharam eva bhaskaraha. Only a rare person who has adopted complete, unalloyed devotional service to Krishna can uproot the weeds of sinful activities with no possibility that they will revive. He can do this simply by discharging devotional service, just as the sun can immediately dissipate fog by its rays. The real purpose of human life is to attain liberation from material entanglement. Such liberation may be achieved by many methods, tapasa, brahmacharyena, shamena cha, damena cha. But all of them more or less depend on tapasya, austerity, which begins with celibacy. Shukadev Goswami says that those who are Vasudeva Parayana, who have fully surrendered to the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, automatically achieve the results of mona, silence, vrata, vows, and other such methods simply by discharging devotional service. In other words, these methods are not so powerful. If one takes to devotional service, all of them are very easily performed. Mona, for example, does not mean that one should just stop speaking. The tongue is meant for speaking, although sometimes to make a big show, a person remains silent. There are many who observe silence some day in a week. Vaishnavas, however, do not observe such silence. Silence means not speaking foolishly. Speakers at assemblies, conferences, and meetings generally speak foolishly like toads. This is described by Srila Rupa Goswami as vacho vegam. One who wants to say something can show himself to be a big orator, but rather than go on speaking nonsense, better to remain silent. This method of silence, therefore, is recommended for persons very attached to speaking nonsense. One who is not a devotee must speak nonsensically because he does not have the power to speak about the glories of Krishna. Thus, whatever he says is influenced by the illusory energy and is compared to the croaking of a frog. One who speaks about the glories of the Lord, however, need not be silent. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends Kirtaniya Sadahari. One should go on chanting the glories of the Lord 24 hours a day. There is no question of becoming mona or silent. The 10 processes for liberation or improvement on the path of liberation are not meant for the devotees. Kevalaya bhaktya. If one simply engages in devotional service to the Lord, all 10 methods of liberation are automatically observed. Prahlad Maharaj's proposal is that such processes may be recommended for the ajitendriya, those who cannot conquer their senses. Devotees, however, have already conquered their senses. Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam. A devotee is already freed from material contamination. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur therefore said, Dushtaman tumi kisher Vaishnav, pratisthar tare nirjane ghare tava harinam kevala kaitav. There are many who like to chant the Hare Krishna mantra in a silent, solitary place. But if one is not interested in preaching, talking constantly to the non-devotees, the influence of the modes of nature is very difficult to surpass. Therefore, unless one is extremely advanced in Krishna consciousness, one should not imitate Haridas Thakur, who had no other business than chanting the holy name always, 24 hours a day. Prahlad Maharaj does not condemn such a process. He accepts it, but without active service to the Lord, simply by such methods, one generally cannot attain liberation. One cannot attain liberation simply by false pride. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj are very dear to Srila Prabhupada. He quotes them very, very often in his lectures and classes, in his purports. It's one of the most often quoted sections of Bhagavatam. The story of Prahlad Maharaj in general, including his teachings to his classmates, as well as this section describing his prayers to Prahlad Maharaj. And there are several reasons for this. One of them is that Prahlad Maharaj, in many ways, his mood was very much expressed and imbibed by Srila Prabhupada in his own life and in his own work. Particularly, Prahlad Maharaj makes this specific point about service to the spiritual master, how he has to serve his spiritual master, Narada Muni, above everything else. And that service has to come even before his service to the Lord. And we know from Srila Prabhupada's life how he took the instruction of his spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to be of the utmost importance. Secondly, Prahlad Maharaj is particularly concerned with preaching Krishna consciousness. Again, we may have read this verse in his prayers where he talks about how he is simply concerned about those fools and rascals who remain entrapped in the well of material existence. And he demonstrated this by his own life in terms of preaching to all those he came in contact with. And so Srila Prabhupada also, he was very inspired, and he often quoted these verses in regard to preaching and emphasized this point as he's emphasizing in this purport. It's very much the mood of Prahlad Maharaj. And finally, Prahlad Maharaj demonstrated a mood of preaching that went beyond the usual audience. Prahlad Maharaj preached to those whom everyone else would stay away from, namely those born in demonic families. His friends, his classmates were all demons of the highest caliber, and his father, of course, as well. And Prahlad Maharaj made a specific point of going to them and saying, no, you too can become devotees of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada quotes these prayers of Prahlad Maharaj often in this regard. His work as a preacher around the world meant that many people questioned his determination to preach Krishna consciousness, to give Brahman Diksha to those who apparently didn't deserve it, who were not born in the right families or with the right culture or the right background. And yet for Srila Prabhupada, Prahlad Maharaj's example was solid evidence, it was solid proof that this message of Krishna consciousness is not restricted by any kind of body or caste or class or heritage or culture or nationality or anything else like that. So we see Srila Prabhupada's purports in his prayers to Prahlad Maharaj are extensive, they're deep, and they often emphasize these points, these moods. Like in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing this element of preaching Krishna consciousness and how the idea of mona or silence makes no sense for a devotee, either in regard to chanting the holy name of the Lord or in preaching that holy name to everyone. Now, in this particular verse, it's very nice. Prahlad Maharaj is making this point about how all these different methods that we typically consider as being liberating and being important, he's rejecting all of them. You see, at the very basic level, we all come into this body, we come into this world with the fundamental desire to enjoy what we see around us, particularly to enjoy our senses. From the very moment we emerge from our mother's womb, we're looking for sensory stimulation. Right? Where is the milk? Where is the comfort? Where is the warmth? This is a natural thing. And as we grow, that desire to enjoy our senses simply increases and increases and increases. And often it manifests then in extraordinary ways of people who become very powerful and who extend the realm of their sense gratification endlessly. As Krishna describes in Bhagavad-Gita, Ishwaroham aham bhogi siddhoham balavan sukhi. I am the master, I am the controller, I'm perfect. I've made all kinds of arrangements to enjoy this world. Some of those people, a few of those people, in the process of enjoying their senses, they come to a very striking realization, which is that this sense enjoyment is not going to be the source of my happiness. Yehi sansparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate. It's only the source of suffering. And Prahlad Maharaj talked about such people in the previous verse that we heard yesterday, right? Maitunadi grihamedi sukham hi tuchham, he says. This enjoyment that comes from sense pleasure, particularly the pleasures of sex and lust, these are tuchham, they're very, very small. And dukkham, he says, it's only a variety of different kinds of suffering. So when this realization shows up, that we're hungry, but the pleasure we get from eating food is followed by bad stomach and diarrhea, right? Then we realize, well, actually, was it worth it? Was the pain of the bad stomach worse, or was the pain of hunger worse, right? In this material world, it's kind of these options. Which suffering do you want? The suffering before we enjoy our senses, or the suffering that comes after we enjoy our senses? In each kind of sense enjoyment, there's a suffering before and a suffering after. You can enjoy sex life, there's a pleasure that comes from that, and there's suffering when we can't satisfy our genitals. But then there's also suffering that comes after that, in the form of so much trouble and headache and disease and all kinds of different things that emerge. So which is better? A person comes to realize, a few people, that there's actually not real happiness to be found from sense enjoyment. Such people who realize that, sukham hi tuchham, that it's not really great, as in the previous verse, then move on to higher forms of pleasure, of sense enjoyment, of the type that Prahlad Maharaj now describes in this verse. The pleasures that come from the mind and from the intelligence, those kinds of pleasures are much, much greater than the pleasures we can get from our senses. To eat the bananas of the mind, to enjoy the pleasures of the intelligence, is so great that a person who tastes those pleasures can, for some time, give up the pleasures of the senses. And I have personal experience of this. My work as a professor and an academic in the university setting in the United States, I end up spending a lot of time with people who are very, very intelligent and completely focused on the life of jnana, or knowledge. And you can see them in the library. They have no desire for food, or for sex, or for comfort, nothing. They haven't bathed in 5-6 days. You can smell. It's all completely, they've given up attachment to the physical body. Why? Because they're experiencing the pleasures of the mind. Dhyana, tapa, vrata, all of these things, this austerity brings great pleasure, it brings great happiness, great joy. And yet, as we grow our abilities, our pleasures of the mind, our abilities for austerity, our abilities to gain knowledge, all of these things, side by side, we are also growing something else. What are we growing? Our pride. Dambhikanam, Prahlad Maharaj is saying. Our sense of false pride grows alongside our knowledge, just as big as our knowledge, or sometimes a little bigger than the knowledge itself. Right? We know this much, and our pride is matching someone who knows about this much. So in this way, our pride increases and increases and increases. This becomes essentially like a house of lac, like the Lakshagraha. It's a big, beautiful edifice, but it takes one slight provocation and our entire edifice of pride comes crashing down. It just comes burning down. There are examples after examples after examples of this in the scriptures. Famously, Durvasa Muni and Ambarish, right? Daksha and Lord Shiva. Again and again, the Bhagavatam describes examples of people who are very qualified in these 10 processes of liberation. swadharma, jnana, tapa, vrata, swadhyaya, all of these things, austerity, self-control, study of scriptures. And yet, when just one slight provocation comes, in any way, right, Durvasa Muni just didn't get to eat first. Oh, he did get to eat first. He didn't get to drink water first. Just one little thing, and the whole edifice of pride and austerity that he had developed came crashing down in a very, very powerful, very public way. That edifice brings purity of the senses, but at the same time increase in pride. And for such persons, by a slight association with devotees of the Lord, like Maharaj Ambarish, that pious credit that they have amassed can become purified and connected to Krishna and turned in the direction of bhakti or devotional service. Those who are very fortunate, this doesn't happen again to everyone, but those who are very fortunate get the association of a pure devotee of the Lord, and all of these good qualities that would have otherwise led to pride are transformed because they are connected to the Lord's service. And when this happens, there's a rediscovery of one's senses again. At this point, that person who has completely rejected their senses, who has stifled them and suppressed them, discovers them once more, but this time in the service of Krishna. In the beginning, for example, we enjoy eating good food. We eat and we eat different varieties of food. This one and that one. How can you eat? All kinds of things people eat. It's really amazing, actually. If you look at the cuisines of the world, people are ready to put anything into their mouth. Anything. Just to see if this time around I can find some new enjoyment, right? Puna punash charvita charvanana. This time we'll try something. It'll be fresh. It'll be new. This leads to suffering, no doubt. So those who are intelligent say, okay, no more food, right? Vrata, I'm going to fast. And they reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce until the body becomes just emaciated and the senses become dull. At some point, such persons, by the association of devotees, may have the fortune of discovering Krishna Prasad. When that happens, I've seen this personally, it's like an explosion takes place, and the senses become rejuvenated altogether. So much prasad, puri, pakora, halwa, rasgulla, they cannot stop eating. When a person first becomes a devotee, there's endless quantities of prasad to eat and eat and eat, and this is part of the purification. And the amazing thing is that once that happens, we rediscover our senses, and as we advance in our practice of bhakti, then once again, we start to reduce our food and give up the gulab jamun and rasgulla and sandesh. But this time, it is not because we want to deny the senses. It's because we can't be bothered by the senses. Because there's something so much better. Tyaktva turna mashesha mandalapati shrenim sadatuchavat. Right? The 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. They gave up eating nidra, hara, vihara, kadi, vijito, and sleep, not because they were trying to suppress the senses, but because they couldn't remember to eat. They were so absorbed. It was like it's kind of like saying, so when was the last time we ate? Was it yesterday? No, it's been 3 days. I think we should take a little bit of buttermilk. Otherwise, we will not be able to maintain this body. Right? It's like remembering to put fuel in your car. It's just something you have to do. And sometimes you forget, and the fuel gauge becomes low, and you have to go fill the fuel. So like that, no interest, no desire. In this way, they reduce again. You see, it's a cycle. Each time you enjoy the senses, you give up. You enjoy the senses again as a devotee, and then you give up. It's a spiral. Each time we're going around the same point, yet each time higher and higher and higher and higher. This we see in Srimad Bhagavatam also. In the case of the 4 Kumaras, when they went to see Lord Vishnu, these were 4 boys who had spent their entire lives as children even though they were the oldest living beings on the planet after Lord Brahma. Why? Just so they would not have to experience the agitations of the senses. And yet, when they get to see Lord Vishnu in Vaikuntha, Bhagavatam describes that beautiful verse, Tasyaravinda nayanasya padaravinda kinjal kamishya tulasi makaranda vayu antargata swavivarena chakara tesham sankszobhamaksharajusam api chitta tanvo. It says that when they saw the Lord, Tasyaravinda nayanasya, the lotus-eyed Lord, padaravinda, they came in contact first with his lotus feet, and they smelled the fragrance of those feet. Kinjalka mishra tulasi makaranda vayu, mixed with the fragrance of the tulasi leaves that had been offered to the Lord. So mixed means the fragrance of Krishna's feet is nice in its own right, but then mixed with tulsi, it becomes better. What happened? Sankshobham aksharajusham. Sankshobham, they became agitated. Antargata swavivirena. When that fragrance went into their nostrils, sankshobham. Chakaratesham. They're in their body. Antargata swavivirena chakaratesham. In their body and mind, sankshobham, they became agitated. Now just imagine, these are boys who have never experienced what sensory agitation is like. Why? Because they've been absorbed in tapa, swadhyaya, all of these things, mona, all these things they've been doing. They've denied the senses so far. But when they come in contact just with the fragrance of the tulasi and the Lord's lotus feet mixed together, it's a new experience. What it means to have the senses agitated, but not material agitation, spiritual agitation as a result. So when we come in contact with devotional service, then naturally the denial of the senses is transcended into transcendental service to the Lord. Prabhupada is saying we then engage in active devotional service to Krishna. And all of those things that we valued so highly, we don't value them anymore. And yet we still do them automatically. Not because they're important, but because we could not care less about anything else. There's a very nice account in Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the story of the brahmanas, the wives of the Brahmins, the Yagnik brahmanas, right? They are engaged in the same thing, yajna, dana, tapa, vrata, all of these things, performing their sacrifices. And Krishna and Balaram and his friends are hungry. And Krishna sends the cowherd boys to them and says, go beg for food from them. He warns them that you speak to them from a distance, because they're not very friendly people. They're not very friendly means what? Dambhikanam. The pride is there. We're the Brahmins, you stay away. Because these were Vaishya boys, most of them. Madhumangal's Brahmin, but most of them, they're Vaishyas, right? So you stay away and you're coming during a yajna sacrifice and children are not allowed. Right? So Krishna warned them that things would be a little difficult with them, but he said, why don't you go ask? They went to ask, and the Brahmins, they said, at least you tell us, will you give us food or will you not? But the Brahmins were so disrespectful, so rude, that they ignored the boys completely. And they went disappointed back to Krishna. Krishna sends them again, and this time he says, you go to the wives of the Brahmins and ask them. They will help you. They will give you food. Now, just think about this. These Brahmins are doing yajnas. The very purpose of yajna is what? The fire is the mouth of the Supreme Lord, right? We see this in Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Virat Rupa, the mouth of the Lord is fire. This is why when we perform yajna, we offer everything, swaha, into the fire. Because we're feeding the Lord. Yajnarthat karmanonyatra. It's for Vishnu, yajnartha. Right, for Lord Vishnu. The fire is made for feeding Vishnu, and yet Vishnu is here at your door with his mouth open, saying, I'm hungry, And you're saying, no, let me put food into the fire here. Means they lost the whole purpose of performing those sacrifices. And yet the wives of the Brahmins understood the purpose, right? And so they took all kinds of risks to go see Krishna. They ran into the forest with their baskets of food in contradiction to all social norms. Number one, they disobeyed their husbands. Okay? And in traditional culture, that would be a really, really bad thing to do. Number two, they went to feed, as Brahmins, they went to feed Vaishyas. And that's, again, something that doesn't happen. The Vaishyas can feed the Brahmins, but not the other way around. Thirdly, they went into the forest to meet another man, or a young man, without any other man present, without their husbands. This is no good also, right? In every way, according to traditional Vedic culture, they made huge transgressions and huge sacrifices. And this is why when they went to see Krishna, and they fed Krishna so nicely, Krishna, after eating, he said, now you go back home. Thank you for coming. It was nice to see you. Go back home. Just like he told the gopis. It's actually a very similar story as the Ras Leela story. He says, now you go home. And just like the gopis, these wives of the Brahmins say, Krishna, you have to be kidding. We came here at risking everything. If we go back now, no one will accept us. Everyone will criticize us. Our husbands will make fun of us. The whole community will despise us for doing what we did. We can't go back. Let us stay here. And Krishna reassures them. He says, no, you go back. I promise you that everyone, your husbands, your community, even the devas themselves will praise you. They will glorify you. And this is what happens. When they go back, the Brahmins, they utter a very, very wonderful verse where they criticize every single good quality they have. Dhik janma, dhik kulam, dhik bahugnatam, they say. To hell with our knowledge, to hell with all of our study, to hell with our birth and our great status and our community as Brahmins and all of that, to hell with it. When Krishna came to our door, we could not give him even some simple food. How wonderful are our wives. They are like our spiritual masters. They have shown us how to love Krishna genuinely, despite the fact that they do not have the sacred thread, despite the fact that they are not great scholars like us, despite the fact that they have not performed all these yagyas. They go through a whole list. Still, they have served Krishna. In fact, it's interesting. The list of 10 things that Prahlad Maharaj gives in this verse, the Brahmins almost exactly go through those 10 things in their verse. And for each one of them, they preface it by the word dhik, which in Sanskrit means to hell with it. Right? Every single one. And so they're corroborating what Prahlad Maharaj is describing here, is what is the use. This is for ajitendriyanam, those who have not controlled their senses, and dambhikanam, those who are exceedingly proud. Only they need to do these performances. And even they, what's the use when all they're doing is they're increasing their pride? For a devotee of Krishna, each one of these items, these 10 items, comes automatically when we become attached to Krishna. When we use our senses in Krishna's service, they all take place in a very natural way. When we have seen the beauty of Krishna's form, how can we be attracted by the beauty of anyone or anything in this world? I mean, here in Sri Vrindavan Dham, you can see this, right, directly. If you come to Mangal Arati in the morning and you get a glimpse of Krishna Balaram, Radhe Shyam, and Gaur-Nitai, you see the extensive beauty that's present in them. How can you imagine any other form of beauty greater than this, isn't it? I mean, at least during the time of Mangal Arati, You see the devotees. Sometimes it's nice to stand in the back during Mangalarti, so you can observe the deities, the devotees. Every devotee is in some state of great meditation or ecstasy. Right? And no one's looking anywhere else. It doesn't matter who's standing next to you, to your left or right or forward or behind, who's stepping on your toe, who's pushing you. Makes no difference, so long as your eyes are fixed on Krishna. Isn't it? Even we, ordinary devotees, can experience that level of focus. And sadly, after Mangalarti is over, then still we want to experience the beauty of this material world, right? That's the unfortunate part. Somehow, we want to take that beauty that we see in the morning and carry it through the entire day. That's our practice of bhakti. And Prabhupada is saying here in the purport, through active devotional service, through keeping ourselves busy in Krishna's service, we can manage that. Right? We can manage to keep that focus from Brahma Muhurta all throughout the day so that our mind does not waver. When the four Kumaras saw Krishna and his beauty, when they first had his darshan, they could not figure out where to look. Bhagavatam says sometimes they looked at his feet and they were so beautiful. And then sometimes they looked at his face. It was so beautiful. And yet after looking at his face, they looked at his feet again because they couldn't figure out what part of Krishna's body was most beautiful. Once we have experienced that beauty, then every beauty of this material world becomes tasteless, right? It becomes so ordinary, so ordinary. Once we have experienced the pleasure of Krishna's holy names, once we have experienced the joy of preaching Krishna consciousness, of talking about Krishna, Krishna Katha, any pleasure we may get from silence, from mona, becomes like suffering for the devotee. Because when we can chant Krishna's name, why will we keep our mouth shut? It's just like in Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? Mahaprabhu is holding his tongue, struggling to try to stop chanting when he's going to answer the call of nature. And then, no, you don't need to do that. Even at that time, you can chant. It's so difficult to hold the tongue from Krishna's holy names, right? Because they're anandam, buddhivardhanam, pratipadam, purnamrita, swadanam. Unlimited joy and relish is there in Krishna's holy names. There's this wonderful, wonderful incident in Chaitanya Charitamrita. You know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He was a great, great scholar, Vasudeva Sarvabhauma. He was such a great scholar that to this day, Sanskrit scholars who are not devotees study Vasudeva Sarvabhauma's works on Nyaya that he wrote before he joined the Hare Krishna movement, before he became a devotee of Mahaprabhu. That's how great of a scholar he was. To this day, people study his works. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spent days listening to him just to convince him to become a devotee. And Prakashananda Saraswati was so impressed by this conversion, he couldn't figure out why Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had converted. Ordinary people, yes, they're delusional, they're bhavuka, they're emotional, but Sarvabhauma, he became a devotee. Prakashananda came to the conclusion that the only way Mahaprabhu could have made him a devotee was, by giving him drugs. He says some oshadhi he must have given him. He became a little crazy. He could not understand until, of course, Prakashananda himself experienced the pleasure of Krishna's names. After Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's conversion, one time all the associates of Mahaprabhu are enjoying water sports in the lake Indradyumna in Puri. And they're all jumping in the water and having water fights, throwing water at each other. And Nityananda Prabhu and Advaitacharya and Ramananda Rai and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is watching this. First he was also enjoying in the water. Then he's watching this with Gopinath Acharya. And he's standing there and he's telling Gopinath, you go tell Sarvabhauma and Ramananda Rai to cut this out, to stop this. Because they're great scholars, he says. He says, Pramanika Jana. They are Pramanika. The whole world looks to them as sources of authority. So this is really embarrassing. The way they're playing like children, he says. Like kids, they're throwing water at each other and giggling and laughing. And Gopinath Acharya, he smiles and tells Mahaprabhu, beautiful, he says, Shushka tarka khali khaite janma gela jar, Shushka tarka khali khaite janma gela jar, Tare lila amrita piyao, ei kripa tumar. He says, Shushka tarka khali khaite, janma gela jar. Their whole life, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has spent his entire life eating shushka tarka khali. He's eating the dry cakes, husks of knowledge, of logic. Shushka tarka khali khaite. It's like eating just like a very, very old dry chapati with no salt and no achar or nothing. They've spent their entire life eating this. Now, Lilamrita, tane lilamrita piyao ei kripa tumar. They have now drunk, you have now made them to drink the nectar of your lila, of your pastimes. So my Lord, what do you expect from them? Imagine a person who has spent their entire life eating dry old chapatis, and one day you give them some kheer to eat. How can you stop them from being ecstatic, from being childish, from being frivolous, from being joyful? It's impossible. So this is the condition of the devotee. If you study Prahlad Maharaj's story, his charitra, you see that he was in this same condition, right? Sometimes he would laugh, sometimes he would dance, sometimes he would cry, sometimes he'd be stunned in silence, out of ecstasy in serving the Lord. And so when he speaks here, he's speaking from personal experience. He's saying, I don't want any of this. I don't want sense enjoyment. I don't want liberation. I don't want knowledge. I don't want austerity. I just want to serve you, my Lord. Through, as Prabhupada is saying, active devotional service. I want to preach Krishna consciousness. I want to save these fools and rascals, he says. Why? Because I want to serve my spiritual master, Narada Muni. And this is what Narada Muni does. Isn't it? You know? Narada Muni goes from place to place, and this is his life. Chanting Harinam and liberating people, preaching Krishna consciousness. To Mrigari the hunter, to King Prachina Barisha, to high and low people, to everyone he's going and giving them this simple message that you chant Krishna's holy names. You serve Krishna. He said, Prahlad Maharaj is saying, this is my mood. This is what I want to do. And this is our mood as well, as followers of Srila Prabhupada. We come to Sri Vrindavan Dham to take this nectar, Lilamrita, in our cups, in our hearts, fill them up, to get the mercy of the residents of this dham, those devotees who are fortunate enough to be living here and serving the Lord. And we fill our cups with this Lilamrita. We make ourselves joyful in Mangalarti and Harinam Sankirtan. And then we go to our various places of service all over the world. And we take on the mood of Prahlad Maharaj and of Srila Prabhupada, of active service to the Lord, of devotional service, of preaching Krishna consciousness, of distributing his books during the marathon, and saying, yes, this is my mission to my spiritual master, because it would be so nice to stay here, frankly, in Mangalarti in Vrindavan Dham. Sometimes it's like that. During those moments in Mangalarti, it's the time you wish that it would expand endlessly. When Vibhavari Shesha is happening, isn't it? Your desire would never stop. If this moment could be frozen, we could sing this forever, and it could stay dark like this in Brahma Muhurta in front of Krishna Balaram. How wonderful it would be. Actually, even more exciting than that moment is the moment of running to Mangalarti in the cold, and the excitement and anxiety of getting there in time to see their lordships. Wouldn't it be so nice if we could stay here forever in that moment? And we can one day. But not by sitting here, but by taking on the mood of Srila Prabhupada and saying, no, I have to take that nectar, fill my heart with it, and go out and give it to the world. In this way, we can take Shri Vrindavan Dham, we can take Mangalarti, we can take Krishna Balaram in our hearts, and we can carry Vrindavan everywhere with us. It is that mood that no, I am not the enjoyer, either of my senses or my mind. I am not the sender of attention, Dambikanam, but Krishna, He is the enjoyer. He is the one whose pride should be increased. You know, Krishna is the most proud of all of them. He says, Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. If anyone says so much mom, me, anyone in this world would consider them proud, no? We tend to stay away from such people who are constantly talking about themselves. But when Krishna talks about himself, is so beautiful, is so nice. He is the one who should enjoy. It is his pride we need to increase. He is the enjoyer. And if we take that mood with us, that is the mood of Sri Vrindavan Dham. That is Vrindavan. The idea that no, I am not the enjoyer, but I am the servant. Krishna is the enjoyer. So with those words, we will stop here. It's 9 o'clock or a minute to 9. If anyone has any questions or comments, then we can address them briefly.
Thank you for a wonderful lecture.
Thank you.
My question is, any endeavor, even trying to become a devotee of Krishna, may lead to pride by reading Bhagavad-Gita, by studying verses, endeavoring in any way, it may lead to pride. So what to do about that?
Yes. So it's a wonderful question. What to do, even in the practice of bhakti, if we do something nicely for Krishna, then it may lead to pride. It's a very natural thing. This is one of the weeds that surround the creeper of devotional service, of bhakti, that we have to be very careful of. You see, our pride is a very interesting thing. Krishna usually only gives us one asset. Some people get two. But basically it's one thing. Some people are very good at kirtan, some people are very good at study of Sanskrit and classes, some people are very good cooks, some people are excellent pujaris, we all get one asset from Krishna to engage in his service. Maybe two. And from that one asset, on that one asset, we build this whole house of cards. We become so elevated, thinking I'm such a great devotee in every way. This one thing Krishna has given me, and yet in everything I'm perfect. I'm great. So when that happens, we don't have to worry. Krishna is very kind. What he does is that house of cards, he'll pull out that bottom card that he gave us. The one time in kirtan, he'll make our dhoti fall off. Or we're giving class and we cannot remember sarva dharman parityajya. Or something will happen, right? And that one thing, Krishna, just like with Arjun, right? He was so powerful as an archer, and yet after Krishna's departure, he could not even protect Krishna's queens from some aborigines, from some local people. That's all. And Krishna will pull that one little card out, and the whole thing will come tumbling down. And everyone will see who we really are. Hopefully, we will see who we really are. Right? That's the most difficult thing. So Krishna's kind like that. That he, for devotees, when he has us in his care, he will show us. Because you see, we start off our bhakti doing things genuinely for Krishna. We really want to please him. And then somewhere halfway through the process, it changes. I started leading kirtan thinking this is for Krishna. And then halfway through, I noticed that everyone's dancing, and I thought, oh, this is nice. I'm such a good kirtaniya. So this happens like halfway through our service, any service. And Krishna, he's very kind. He will see that something genuine is there, and he'll see that we've built a castle of pride on it, and he'll show us. And usually he does this in some way through his devotees. So if this pride is coming forth, or we feel it's coming forth, then we just have to stay in the association of devotees. That's the key things. The devotees are very merciful, very kind. They will point out where the pride is and what the problem is, and it'll be finished pretty quickly. The challenge is not reducing that pride, discovering it. The challenge is accepting it when Krishna does it. Right? Krishna will do it, no doubt. We can be rest assured. This is how he shows his mercy to devotees. But the challenge is to accept that humbly and say, wow, Krishna is giving me a message, let me accept it. With our head low, and to be grateful to Krishna for that lesson. That is the difficult thing, when it actually happens. We may not see it coming, usually we cannot. But when it does come, how we react to it, in what mood we accept it, that's the sign of an advanced devotee. Right? And so Prabhupada explains in the case of Jai and Vijay, they were corrected by the 4 Kumaras. But Prabhupada says their fall down was accidental. Why? Because the moment it was pointed out to them, the moment they realized that these are the Kumaras, immediately they offered their respects and begged for forgiveness. Right? And so Prabhupada says that is the sign of an accident, that they had genuine humility. Because they were able to respond to it very nicely. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, these were knowing that he is a Lord, he is a Krishna, or he is simply wife. Thinking in their mind.
Yes. So the Brahman Patnis, it's a good question. Sridhar Swami explains in his commentary that the Brahman Patnis had heard about Krishna. See, their husbands were totally shocked. How is it that our wives, they're expressing confusion, how is it that our wives, who have not done any of the study that we have done, know about Krishna and knew what the right thing is to do? And so Sridhar Swami explains that the Brahmins did not realize that their wives had been getting the association of devotees and hearing about Krishna. Through how? Through such people, Brajabasis, like the lady who sells flowers. They would come to the door, and she would sell flowers in Gokul and Vrindavan, and then she would come to the village of the Brahmins and sell flowers there, which they need for their puja, and they would speak about Krishna. Krishna is so wonderful like this. In this way, they developed their affection, their love for Krishna. It was not Krishna as God, right? It was Krishna as he is the most lovable object, like the moods of the other Brajbasis. And so they, by association of the devotees, they understood Krishna's significance and its meaning. And the Brahmins, it's interesting, because of the lack of the association of devotees, even after they understood their mistake, the chapter ends in Bhagavatam by saying that they knew Krishna, they understood their mistake, still they could not go see Krishna in the forest. Still they could not go, even though Krishna was still there. Right? They saw their mistake, you should run now to see Krishna and ask him forgiveness. But they could not do that. Why? Out of fear of Kamsa. Out of fear of Kans, that he will hear and then our positions will be destroyed as Brahmins. So you can see the problem, Dambhikanam, right? The problem with false pride and all of these things. Nice. So our time is up, although there are more questions. I thank you all very much for your attention and for giving me this opportunity to serve you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu ki jai.